that I am famously an expert about cars and going 0 to 60. But we are live here to chat about not cars, but TV from this last week. Actually, this last like 2 or 3 weeks. I'm so excited. The thumbnail gives it away. We are going to be talking about Wednesday on Netflix, kind of for the majority of this. Kate and Carey, I have missed you guys, and I'm so excited to be talking about something that all three of us have seen. Now, I do have an agenda, and there are a lot of other things that we can be talking about this week, and let's just go through the news as quickly as possible because I do think there were a couple exciting announcements we can touch on before we dive into the world of Miss Wednesday.
I actually cannot find my list again, so off the top of my head, I do know that Miss Scarlet and the Duke has been renewed for season 4. So when it comes January and season 3 is out, Cammie and I are going to be back on that bandwagon. And then when season 4 is out, expect us right back where we are now. Just gushing over something that we shouldn't like, but we dearly do.
So excited. These last 3 weeks have also been pretty good weeks for movie releases. We had the second Black Panther installment, which hearing great things about. I also went and saw the movie we've been talking about, I think, since like for months now, which is the Anya Taylor-Joy, The Menu. I am beside myself. I'm two people, apparently. I'm beside myself. It's 10 out of 10. We don't have time to dive into that today. And you don't want me to dive into that today because you don't want spoilers. Go see it. It's so good. We also had Knives Out Glass Onion theatrical release. I'm going to be as good as humanly possible and wait to watch it over Christmas with my siblings. But it has been a good past couple weeks for specifically movies that we talk about on here. So that's been pretty fun.
Mm-hmm.
Without further ado, I really feel like we should just dive right into it and talk about Wednesday. Now, I'm going to put both of you on the spot. You've never heard this question before. On a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being terrible, 5 being perfect, what would you two rate it? And I'm going to give you both the top spot and relegate myself to this little interested bubble at the bottom.
Kate, you take it.
Okay, so I would probably give it a 4.5. There was a couple things that kind of every once in a while would kind of make me quirk my eyebrow, or some acting choices from certain cast members were kind of questionable. But overall, it was a great story, and I was exactly what I was sold, which is kind of always what I want, is I don't want the plot being ruined over the commercials, but I want you to sell me the correct package. And I felt like I knew exactly what I was going to get. With just the right amount of surprise, and the story itself was really well done. So I would say it was very little complaints.
Yeah.
4.5.
Strange, but my rating was exactly the same. I promise. No, it was. I think, like I said before, it was like you go into it, and like you said, you basically had an idea of what you're going to get. They didn't sell you something or didn't tell you you're going to get something, and they didn't deliver, and they did. Fantastic performances, I thought, and unique and interesting way to tell a story, and I had fun with it. I thought it was great.
I will go big or go home here. I'm going to go ahead and give it a full 5 out of 5. I truly have no notes. I'm not saying it's the best thing I've ever watched. It's not like if I were ranking every piece of media I've ever consumed, it wouldn't necessarily even be in the top 10, but it is in the elite. Like, this is so good, chef's kiss. I loved it from start to finish. I went into it with pretty high expectations. I'm not going to lie. So it would have been really easy for it to not meet my expectations. I know this sounds contradictory saying it's a 5 out of 5, but it's not perfect. It's just that there's no real, it's the cheesy no notes. It's truly no notes. I just want more. It left me with such a good, like, taste in my mouth at the end with how they stayed kind of true to her character throughout. Because one of the things that I want to start and kind of pick your brains on is this idea of her being some sort of other. They use the term outcast, but she is an other even in regards to the outcast, in that they vaguely play with these sort of Sherlockian sociopathic ideas with her, and that she's kind of closed off. We see references to her being closed off to her own family, and sort of these like, like it's silly and it's goofy and kooky and like all of the things, but she's sort of closed off to her own family, and references to like murdering them, this, that, or the other, but like doesn't actually. She's closed off to her own friends. She uses romantic attachments for personal gain, which I think is like a very fun and interesting thing to explore. And I don't know that we've really seen that in this way, in this same sort of funny, kooky environment. And I was so worried we get an ending of like, and actually, just like the Grinch, she grew a heart. But we don't really get that. We get a touching moment with her and, her little rainbow friend and stuff. But ultimately, they stay true to her character throughout. My question for you guys is, what did you think of her characterization? And how do you want this to move forward without... Like, how do you want this to move forward in terms of character growth without really changing her away from being Wednesday?
You can go first, Carey.
And that was a really good point, because I was sort of fearful of how they were going to sort of wrap this up at the end and sort of like say, hey, see, look, she can be this or can be that. One of the interesting things about her character is you sort of see how the other characters respond to her and sort of how they gravitate toward her, but it's in a way that, like, as an audience, you see what her character is and you're intrigued because you're watching this show. But in terms of her interactions with other people, the way she treats some people and the things that um, she's sort of like singular in purpose and that sort of thing. It's interesting that she still has people who gravitate toward that within the show. And I thought that was cool, because it means that she didn't have to necessarily change who she was to sort of get those interactions and get those connections with other people. So I thought that was cool. In terms of where I see it going, I just think it is interesting, because I don't know that. I mean, I'd love to see her continue at Nevermore, but I get this distinct impression that if we get a season two, we might get away from that a little bit, because there's it it there's more story to tell there, but it also feels like they wrapped that up pretty well. And now there's this larger sort of mystery that will take her beyond there. So she may get back to Nevermore to rely on some of the people that she connected with there. But I think there will be an expansion of where her story goes that takes her a little bit more away from Nevermore.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting because we've talked before about like anti-heroes. And she has a lot of the hallmarks of an anti-hero, but in a very different way than we've ever seen. I mean, she has the edgy, the brooding, the macabre kind of look on life, which is kind of very central to a lot of the stereotypical anti-hero characters. But a lot of how she approaches things and how she visualizes the world and how they explain that is so different from the anti-hero, because a lot of times when they display the anti-hero, that's like their lack of morality or their less morality compared to a true hero is typically what makes them morally questionable. It's what makes them the dislikable thing. It's what makes them harder to love, and requires emotional investment for you to care about that character. For her, it kind of flipped it on its side. And weirdly enough, a lot of her darker sayings and her attitude and everything else was the first kind of entrance into her charming personality and the endearingness of her character, because it's played more for the laughs side of it rather than the pity or the grief side of it, which is it's a different approach, and I think it opens up a whole different side of exploration to the anti-hero character as a whole. And so I thought that was a really great piece of her. And I agree that I liked how she did develop and grow, but it wasn't to a point of it being exaggerated or ridiculous. She still has her sayings, her catchphrases of kind of distancing and putting people off, but you got to see throughout the season how much she genuinely cares for the people who she has created loyalties with.
Mm-hmm.
She's just not a warm, fluffy person. She's not physically affectionate. She's not going to do that. She never will do that. But they did show her humanity and show she's really not the Raven that they keep telling her that she is.
Mm-hmm.
That as much as she says she's okay with being alone, she's more than just the Raven. She's not as alone as she's fated to be. And I think if they go forward, that's one of the themes that they're going to continue to explore, because I do think they kind of left that open, where they just said you're the Raven and nobody questioned it. They would just went with it. And I was like, that seems wrong. So I think that'd be a really great place for them to explore. And then kind of what Carey was saying, where we might leave Nevermore in the next sections. What would be interesting maybe is there was a kind of a couple lines about, well, you should come visit me in San Francisco during this break. Or so that would be kind of a Wednesday goes to San Francisco, and it'd be a whole different setting with a couple of the same key characters being present. Would be an interesting twist.
Mm-hmm.
A new setting, adding new problems, new loyalties, all that stuff would be really great, while still being able to grow her story.
I love the idea of her moving around. I think back to something, and I may be a little biased, but one of the Netflix shows for this demo of, young teens to whatever age wants to watch it is the Series of Unfortunate Events Netflix adaptation specifically that they did. And one of the things about that, and this is also reflected in the books, is you're always in a different setting. There's one singular book where they're in a school that happens to sit sort of in the middle of all this, but every time they encounter a new place, it almost to the point where you can reuse no set. You're always in a wildly different environment, and that's why it's very easy to be interested in these continuous characters, because they're always placed in a different environment. And I think with her, they have a bit of a limitation. It's a strength, but it's a limitation in that they cannot fully change her personality. They cannot fully turn her into somebody who's warm or, effusive or fake or any of this. She's extremely transparent. She's extremely blunt. She's extremely dark. She has a very specific sense of humor. And because she is representing a character from a source text, there are some limitations to what they can do to that without just turning her into not Wednesday. But by putting her in different environments, I think it's something that can bring out a different side of her. And one environment we didn't get to see her in is her own home. Really, throughout this whole season, we get some glimpses of her with her family, and she's very much a teenager with a chip on her shoulder, so she's not really bonding with her family during the majority of that. We get a couple breakthrough scenes, but not much. It would be interesting to see her at home as well. It would be interesting to see her in a non-school setting. It would be interesting to see her with more adult cast, as I did find a lot of her scenes that were the most compelling were the ones that were with adults. She is very much both in this iteration and also I think in most iterations of Wednesday, she's that kid that is in the corner talking to adults and not playing with other kids at a party. And it would be interesting to see a season of that kind of being the case and not carrying over all these kids, as much as they are great. And honestly, none of them are kids. Most of them are transparently 35 years old, but you get what I'm saying. Let's dive into those side characters, though. In some cases, they're the friends. In some cases, they're the antagonist. In some cases, they're the villains. In some cases, they're the romantic interest. But those waters are sure muddied to where most characters are arguably all four things at once. We're talking about the kids here, not the adults. What do you think of those muddied waters as we have a lead character who is an antagonist? So everybody is an antagonist to her.
I thought it's very funny. I thought it was interesting. Like you kind of pointed out how she used both of her romantic interests.
Yeah.
That for most of the series, most of the season, she was very suspect of one specifically, and I cannot remember his name. And then uh, the kind of last minute switch up was she had to start using the other one until she finally figured out he was the bad guy in the end. I
Tyler and
I'm not gonna
Xavier.
say that I think it's
Xavier
the
is
most.
the Xavier is
Yes,
like the vampiric looking one that has
it's
the
the student.
yeah, the student that looks
Yes,
like he has the hair that he always wants to do the like flip that everybody did like that
yes.
like 2012. And then Tyler is the one that is like in flannel and his
Hmm.
dad's the sheriff and he's like looks like the guy that's going to grow up to be the lead in a Hallmark movie in 20 years.
Why does Xavier remind me of like a Culkin kid? He looks like he could be related to
Yeah.
one of them somehow. I don't
Which
know.
kid?
He looks like Macaulay Culkin. He looks like a Culkin kid. Like he
Yes.
could be a cousin or something.
You know he's in
Strange.
something that I think all of us have seen.
Yeah,
He
I
was
kind
the
of see
guy, he
that.
was the kid from The Gifted.
Oh,
He was the young
damn. Yeah.
yeah.
The Wonder Twins, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of the two kids there. Yep.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think I've seen that.
You
Yeah,
missed
I
a
don't think
little
I've
bit,
seen
but
that.
not
I
too
don't know
much.
what you're talking about.
But
Okay.
I didn't mean to interrupt,
Um,
but I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, but to
No,
your
go
point
ahead.
about
I don't really know where I was going with that.
and I was just gonna say to your point about like everyone sort of being an antagonist, right? It sort of plays into what her personality is because everyone is either someone who is either an obstacle, an opponent, or someone that she needs to manipulate, right? So
Hmm.
with that being the case, it sort of lays the groundwork for her to figure out how who is it that she can trust and who is it that if she pushes and uses and so it's like someone like Enid, right, who she sort of tried to push and manipulate and use, but ultimately developed a pretty significant relationship with, and and it started from sort of this antagonistic relationship, and I think that's how they are all start for her, and so I guess with that sort of being her platform where she sort of starts all of her relationships, I think she'll still do that, but I think she will probably start to see more allies in people as opposed to just sort of obstacles or people to manipulate. Um, but I think she'll always sort of carry that baggage.
Yeah. It was interesting. I was seeing some discussion on, social media about like, well, I liked this character and I wish they weren't an antagonist, or I wish I wish we had seen her bond more with girls rather than fight with girls, or I wish this character wasn't painted a bad light, whatever. And I just think that none of the characters that she's interacting with, whether it be, her first sparring partner, Bianca, or any of the other kids who might oppose her in some way or challenge her in some way, none of them are really doing anything innately bad by Wednesday's own standards. And most of them are antagonistic towards her because of some challenge that she issued. They're dishing out what they're given. So it's interesting because there are, bad guys, there are monsters, there is that here, but then there's also this monster that she has to learn to grapple with, which is like people don't always like you, and unless you're willing to kind of compromise yourself and be fake or pretend to have some kind of loyalty that you don't actually, or pretend to be weaker than you actually are, there will be people who will dislike you simply because you are strong or because you have an abrasive personality or whatever. I thought that was really interesting to explore. TV Movie Sparks in the chat says, hello, I love Wednesday, my favorite show on Netflix other than Stranger Things. Hello, TV Movie Sparks. It is right up there tying Netflix's record with Stranger Things. So seems like you got some pretty good taste. She also adds, I like Wednesday and Xavier together, rooting for them. Well, it's like you read my mind because that was about to be my next question. You know me, we're not going to get through this discussion without bringing up ships. Now, we've already got one vote here for Wednesday and Xavier. What's your take on the romance here? Because there are quite a few romantic options this girl is given. Granted, most of them are bad guys or girls or questionable choices, but there are options. Dive in.
Well, personally, the tragic failed relationship, the one that would never work in the end, her with Tyler, reminded me of somebody I know pretty well, actually. She's got dark hair, and there's the guy, he's really tall. I don't know. Sorry. Um,
I saw this
anyway,
Instagram post that she posted on that she posted. It was like this little video of her like hopping on the lap of the guy who plays Tyler, and they kind of like spin around. And when I tell at first that it helps that it was like filmed on a potato, like it's the lowest quality video you've ever seen. It literally looks like me and Peter 10 years ago. Identical. Anyways, please proceed.
yeah, the
Yes.
moment she rocked up and she started fixing the espresso machine. I sat there and I had to pause it. I laughed for about 10 minutes, just the role reversal and the irony of it all. It was very funny to me specifically, but I digress. In actuality, I do think the Xavier thing has more potential. I could even see it written on the wall throughout most of the season. Um, I will say I don't know how I feel about how spineless both of them came off
Mm-hmm.
in how much they allowed her to manipulate them. Like, it is her story and you're supposed to be rooting for her, and I did, and I don't mind watching her manipulate people. I would say it was one of her more endearing things. Like, it is a character flaw, but it was an endearing part of her character. But if you want me to buy into that relationship, he has to stick up for himself. And he does at the end, but it's the one time that she's trying to help him and he
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't want to hear it. And so for me to really buy into that, they're going to have to really work on making them more equals or partners. And of course, they'll have fights and arguments, and she'll use him, and he might do something bad back. But we're not on that footing yet, but I would say I do see the potential and I'm okay with that. Especially since compared to what actually ends up happening with Tyler, it's much better.
Right. The bar's on the floor.
For
And that's exactly why I feel like Enid is a better option, right?
There it is.
She challenged Wednesday much more than any of these two dudes did. She held her own, and because here's the deal, right? They're absolutely total opposites. I mean, you got like rainbows and butterflies and like basically like goth black, pitch black. And the way their room was set up, split 50-50. I mean, it just screamed out to me, yeah, this is where we should be. This is the relationship we should be seeing. And I'm not saying that we're going to get that. It may remain just as significant friends as what they are, but it's the best relationship on the show. Whether it becomes romantic or not, I don't know. We'll see that, but it's the relationship I like the most.
Mm-hmm. The archetype that we see with Wednesday and Enid is very reminiscent to me of, I'm going to say loosely, like an anime or childhood animated film romance, seeing this sort of like dark, broody versus this like light, whimsical, stylized in the form of Tim Burton is very interesting to me. And I think if either of them was a guy, particularly if Wednesday was a guy, we would immediately be like, oh, of course, this is the romance. Like, forget everybody else. But what she needs the most, I suppose, in this environment for purely resource, you know, for a social resource, she needs a friend that doesn't preclude them from romance. I'm sort of, I see them as the best option, but this is going to be very uncharacteristic of me. I'm not sure I want her to have an endgame romance. After watching her throughout this season use people in a absolutely laudable, justifiable way, but use, in this situation, I need to calm this guy down. So I guess I'm going to ask him to the dance. In this situation, I need more information. I'm going to kiss this guy. A lot of her actions, whether they completely call it out or whether they kind of subtly work it in there, she's just using guys, which by the way is justification for her getting with a girl. So they never really dive into her being really that transfixed with any one person in a different way than she's transfixed with somebody else. But we have this sort of, I use the term kind of Sherlockian sociopathic tendency. I'm not sure I need to see that breakdown with a full blown romance. I think this could be an instance where we just have all kinds of sort of slow burns that don't ever give us real satisfaction. I think that could be TV movie sparks. I know you want to see Wednesday and Xavier in the end. And I'll give you this, out of everybody on the show, Wednesday and Xavier have the best chemistry. They are toxic. That is not a good match. Wednesday and Xavier, I'm not, I mean, root for them all you want. Like, I'm not saying anything's bad about rooting for toxic ships. One of my current favorite TV ships is just like pure toxicity. Love it. 100 out of 10, no notes. But in terms of chemistry, Wednesday and Xavier had it in the bag. 100%. Every scene with them together, when they take like a little step closer to smoldering, completely decimated what she had with Tyler or anybody else.
Yeah, I agree. I also, so kind of circling back to the Enid situation, part of it is because I am watching currently a different media, it's Critical Role. There is a friendship that toes the line of will they, won't they? Is this romantic or is this platonic? They would kill for each other, die for each other, have done so, will do so again. And they have very similar archetypes, kind of inverted in a lot of ways, but they do have this energy together. And with that, I see that romance a lot more. I see that they have this backstory, whereas with Enid and Wednesday, they fill a different purpose for that section. So I very much do see them relying on each other as friends rather than anything romantic. And yeah, you can point to like Enid already had romantic interests. Whether that actually ever continues or comes to fruition in any full true capacity is to be seen. But I think what's truly important between Wednesday and Enid was immediately able to call her out. Like, whereas the other kids kind of were like, you're weird even for weird kids. Enid was very nice to her at first, but didn't wait 5 minutes when they were alone to go, hey, cut the crap. You're weird. We're all weird here. You're not going to win on a weird competition. Just get over it and make friends or you're going to be alone. And it was that level of honesty that I think really kind of set them on this equal footing. And I would say she's really the only one that ever was able to sustain an equal footing with Wednesday, was able to kind of keep up with her, stand toe-to-toe in a fight. The only other exception would be the principal. And I would say that that's interesting because there's the white, the black, and the colorful. But that's a whole like imagery thing. But I don't think that means it has to be romantic. I think that's because they both served, I would say, the most influential roles in Wednesday's character development in this season. And that the guys were just other moving pieces that we might get to explore later. So I am kind of more on I would prefer her to stay friends with Enid, but I would not be opposed to it if it developed into that. I just think that for right now, it served a better purpose for them to be friends. And I will agree, her and Xavier had some really good chemistry. I would say that it was lacking in some writing, because what kind of drove me crazy about the whole Tyler Xavier situation was how much they also consistently knew she was manipulating them, and they just kept on chasing after her anyway. And the Tyler part kind of gets explained later because he was trying to use her back, but Xavier just really was into her and just let her tread all over him until the very end. And even still, so that's going to have to be resolved for that to have any possibility to work.
Well, I'll say this, right? You have met teenage boys, right?
That's what I was gonna say.
Um, it's like, hey,
Yeah,
you put me down, you put me down, you push me away,
that's
and
fair.
what time do you want me to take you to school tomorrow? I mean,
Right.
that's who teenage boys are. That's who we are. So I give them a little bit of leeway in that regard. But you're right, because I thought the same thing during the first few episodes. And to my point about how we as an audience view Wednesday and how her fellow characters did. It's like if someone treated you the way that Wednesday treated those folks, you'd be like, why am I gravitating toward her other than the
Mhm.
fact that this is a show and the writing says I have to? You would sort of like run and get away, right?
Mhm.
But to your point, it's like, but I mean, let's be real. She's brilliant. She's capable. She's not bad looking. And so, yeah, you're going to have people gravitate toward you. And so I give them a little bit of leeway, the boys in particular, for that part of it. Um, I did have a question, and I don't know if I'm jumping ahead or anything,
Go for it.
but the dance scene, right,
Yes.
which is
Hmm.
freaking fantastic. But was I the only person? I mean, I don't know that I saw like any hints that this was going to happen. I don't believe before I watched the episode. But if someone had told me Wednesday was going to be dancing at this party, I would have said no, no way in hell unless she was dancing on someone's grave. So did you see that coming? Did you expect that? And what did you think about it?
I thought it was an interesting choice for her character because I fully expected her to be the one kind of smoldering in the corner, judging everyone for all of the fun that they're having. But they subverted that in a way that I felt was still true to her character. They showed she also can have fun. She has things that she finds fun and she finds funny. They're just very different than perhaps how other people would experience fun. But once she started expressing herself and doing her, silly, kooky, Adams family esque dance moves, others started dancing around her. And the thing that really, I mean, there's many things that make the scene extremely iconic, but the thing that I really liked in terms of how they showed it is when it first starts, you see her so in contrast to everybody else. She's, dancing bizarrely, and people are kind of looking, but there's no one near her, no one's actually dancing with her, and certainly nobody's dancing like her. But by the end, as we see other people dancing, she's not that different from them. There are things that set her apart. The quality of movement and the type of dance that she's doing, and
Hmm.
all of that is very obviously like quirky and odd and very Wednesday and not the same as what everybody else is doing. But when you just kind of let it all run together, it's a dance scene where people are dancing and having fun together. And I thought that was a nice choice to show how she's different than everybody else, but she's not as different as everybody thinks she is. In the same way that I think we all as teens have to go through, when we were teens, had to go through this
Hmm.
sort of, oh, I'm not like everybody else. I'm different. I'm whatever. And then you realize, like, yes, you can stay true to yourself and you are different, but not that meaningfully different than everybody else. Like, you still want to have fun and you still want to party and you still want to make friends and you want to be away from your friends sometimes and you want to wear a pretty dress, but you want it to be a different pretty dress than everybody else was wearing. And we're all kind of the same in that situation, whether that's comforting or non comforting. Communicating all of that in just the dance scene and having it be as sort of like startlingly funny and exciting to watch, I thought was so well done.
Yeah, because I actually went into that scene fully expecting her to dance. Because I think the big difference between kind of the image of the sulking in the corner, wallflower, shy, the stereotypical shy girl, and Wednesday is she's not shy. She is reserved. She pulls away from people. She doesn't like to be everybody's friend, but she's also not shy and she does not care one jot what you think of her. And it's a great representation of that. They kind of always put the wallflower, the shy girl, is the girl that's on in the corner that doesn't want to dance, that doesn't want anybody to look at her. And it's not that Wednesday wants people to look at her. She just doesn't care if you're looking.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't care if you dislike her, if you like her. She says she doesn't want you like her. She I think the most core aspect of her character is actually her intense integrity of her own self. She's not always truthful, but I would say that she is always herself. She will
Mhm.
never bend on anything that's her. And even when she's lying, even when she went to a dance that she didn't want to go to, she's always going to do it her way. And so this dance is her enjoying herself when she's doing stuff that she doesn't want to do. She might be at a dance that she didn't really want to go to because it's social norms and bleh, gross. But if she has to be there, might as well make the best of it and dance my funny dance. And by that intense and personal integrity to who you are as a person is infectious. It's infectious in real people. It's infectious in the story. It's explored in all kinds of media that this strong adherence to who you are makes other people more comfortable in who they are. And I think it was a great show of that magnetism by her dancing and being comfortable with being the weird kid and being the most kooky dancer. All the other kids, all the other wallflowers, everybody started dancing. Um, and some of them did dance a little funny, some did goofy things, but nobody was quite as boldly themselves as her. And they only accepted to be that way when they saw how easily she was doing it.
Mhm.
Well said.
Absolutely. Well, last question, and then we'll take a few minutes to breeze through what else we watched this week. My question is, we kind of already hinted at this idea that we know that there's probably going to be future seasons. We certainly hope so. And we've talked about what location kind of choices we want them to make. We've talked a little bit about what we expect for her character moving forward. What would you like to see in a season 2 in terms of moving this show forward and evolving it, other than more Tim Burton deliciousness in some other setting?
Well, I know that there are two things that I certainly want to see. More Uncle Fester.
Yeah.
That is, and I think someone pointed this out, and I didn't really pay much attention to it, and I probably should. But someone pointed out that like really the only time that she genuinely smiles with excitement, not a smirk, is when she saw Uncle Fester. And I'm not one of those people that says, "Hey, people need to smile more, women need to smile more." But it was just telling that even when she saw her family, when she saw Pugsley, this was the one true minute or the one true moment where she smiled with joy. And I want to see more of why that is. And you sort of get surface level of why that is because they're both outcasts within that family, so they probably had to huddle together. So I want to see more of that. And what I really hope is whoever this obviously it seems like her journey will be trying to find out if there and who is this ultimate mastermind beyond obviously, and I forget who Christina Ricci or what character was playing, but essentially
Thornhill.
there is some mastermind that's out there sort of plotting her downfall. So I want to find out more about who that is. And strangely enough, it might be the kind of person who has that sort of equal footing for but different sort of goals that Wednesday can sort of see in herself. So I think that would be interesting to see and explore in the next season.
Yeah, I one of the big things that I noticed while watching it was that it kind of, to put it in lack of better terms, it's like what Riverdale wanted to be. It's like what Riverdale thought it was going to be. Uh, when we started to see the witch trials and we started to see her kind of getting these visions, it's this weird kind of middle ground between like That's So Raven and Riverdale, and it's such a weird kind of intersection. But it was an unexpected storyline for them to explore. I had never considered them doing the witch trials, but it was such a great way to explore the problems that this school would have had. It's all these other things that it was a great way of telling it. So wherever they go, I do want them to kind of weave in her visions and especially the past, the historical significance of where they are and things that only she can figure out that really kind of separates her from the pack. Um, that kind of makes her so intrinsically important in this story. Because what I thought was great was that it was kind of this pseudo investigation story as well, but there was no way for them to have figured it all out if she didn't have visions. And normally you could say that's a cheat code or whatever, but I think how they do it and how they use it and how it is a kind of, it will be obviously an ongoing learning curve for her to learn what they mean and how to control it. I think it's an added bit of intrigue that will kind of bind all these seasons together no matter where she is. This adherence to the past and learning from it in the future.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see them explore her abilities and the morality associated with them. You mentioned how well done the visions surrounding her are. I want to see more of her also exploring where her moral code lies. We see a bit of it this season, but I want to see her do worse things. I want to see her do things that bump up against her moral code. I don't think using guys who had romantic interest in her really bumped up against her moral code. So what does? What would be the issue where she would want to do that thing, but she is not going to do that thing because to her that is wrong? Loyalty, I don't think, is hard for her. Defeating a bad guy who wants to kill her friends, I don't think is hard for her. Where I want to see her potentially struggle with wanting to do X but needing to do Y. I think that would be really interesting to see how that manifests in a character like her who very rarely stops and considers morality in the same way that everybody around her might be doing it, other than how it would impact her or negatively impact her if she does bad things. So I think that would be fun. I see that we only have 13 minutes left, and I want to hear about what else you guys have watched this week. So, Kate, do you want to start us off? Take a couple minutes and breeze through everything you've watched in like the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, so I watched The Crown. Yep, I watched it. That's all. It wasn't as good as the previous seasons. I think that in previous seasons, they understood that the best tool they had for the crown was using the structure of the royal family to tell stories about humanity. And then this season, they were trying to warp history into telling by using humanity to tell stories about the royal family, and it was a downfall on all sides. I don't mind if they're not historically accurate as long as you're doing it for the benefit of a story about humanity, and instead you're just trying to make us care more about one specific historical person. That wasn't really successful. You just kind of made it boring by doing that. And in one note, and I think they sped through a lot of historical events without giving any context. And yeah, it's a quick Google search away, but based on the fact that they already binned history as it is, and it's a pretty well-known fact that they're not always exactly accurate, it's hard to know what I need to look up. It's hard to know what they're going to change, what subtext they're changing, all of that. And I think that they failed to give proper context. They failed to make it a story rather than a documentary, but it fails as a documentary, it fails as a story, it's not engaging. It wasn't terrible, but it just wasn't great. Then I also watched Miss Scarlet and the Duke. Those final 2 episodes are probably some of my favorite television we've had all year. I think maybe 30-minute prolonged sequence of, is he going to leave London? Is she going to catch him on time? Is he going to go to Scotland? And it's so back and forth and tense. But I love the way they solved it on his side. I like that finally, what is his name? The young kid. I cannot remember his name.
The
it's
whatever captain's son.
Yeah. Yes. Whatever.
He grew a spine.
The young detective.
He hit puberty.
He finally grew a spine. He hit puberty. He's always been, because he very much is like the definition of a nepotism baby in this situation, but it's very clear he doesn't want that. And I can at least appreciate that he didn't want that, and I had a little sympathy for him because of that.
He wanted to do what true nepotism babies do and go into the arts.
Yes. And so at least he finally realized the way I can truly ditch the nepotism blanket that surrounds me is not pleasing my father. It's standing up to my father. And I thought
Hmm.
that was a nice switch up because I hadn't thought of that kind of problem because I was worried they were going to do that like stereotypical TV thing where he's going to leave and then he's going to show up on our doorstep in the beginning of next season, or she's going to beg him to stay and he's going to quit his job that he loves, and then there's going to be resentment or whatever else. And none of that happened because another character who he's been putting in the time with helped save him. And I thought that was a really great finale that sets up still romantic tension with them and potential for them to work together in more close ways, more partnerships with the detective as well, because I do think he's kind of a delightfully silly character.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to season three. I was in the last few minutes really worried that it was going to turn out bad, that I wasn't going to like how they were going to wrap it up, but I was so pleased with how they used that scene to really change expectations and set us up for a great season three.
Okay, so number one, I want the one thing that I wanted from the finale that I didn't get. Well, there's many things. You titled the finale "The
Yeah.
Proposal," and there was no proposal, so that's number one on what I
Told
wanted and
you.
didn't get. Yeah,
Rude.
yeah, but I was thrilled, like 100 out of 10. Once again, so
Hmm.
good. Renew the show for a million seasons. Torture me with a slow burn. Don't give me anything I want. Keep the relationship toxic. Like it's totally fine. I know what I signed up for. Another thing that I kind of wanted and didn't get, I wanted him to potentially struggle with the idea of wanting her to come with him. I wanted him to potentially propose the idea of her going to, starting a practice there, distancing from her father's city, anything like that, and having to like propose this kind of wild thing, but without it being romantic. I think that would have been delicious. I also thought they might actually have him go, and then season three starts with a time jump where he's been called back. Somebody's out, he has to fill a role. It's just temporary, it's just for the duration of this case. I'm here for a short time, but turns out this is the big bad for all of season three, and then he has to struggle with that. I also think, and this is the last thing that I think, this is not the last thing that I think. I also think that the little detective kid who just grew a spine is into Eliza, and that is kind of messing with him. They've subtly, so subtly
Hmm.
hinted at that, but there's no other explanation for why he told him to guard Eliza but not talk to her. I don't think he likes literally anybody talking to Eliza because he's super possessive and like controlling, and it's so toxic. This show is incredible, literally a masterpiece, pun
I
intended.
I would agree with you on every point, except I don't actually think he didn't want him to go talk to Eliza. I think he still sees the detective as incompetent, which is not incorrect. Um, so I genuinely think there's a bit of, if you're there, you're just gonna make a situation worse. Please just make sure she doesn't leave, but don't go talk to her. Um, that's more of where I took it, but I do definitely see that this young detective is smitten by with
Yes.
Miss Scarlet. He is just head over heels with her, and it's adorable. And you can even see a little bit that she even recognizes it, and I don't think she manipulates him in the same way, but it's not like she doesn't. She does kind of
She
act
uses her
sweetly.
charm as her
Yes,
strength
she's
with
yes, she is.
everybody. It just happens to be
Yes.
incredibly effective on him.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, she's not doing it any more on him. She's just being nice and sweet and charming and steals the evidence right off of him in front of his face and he doesn't even notice. Um, but it's so much more effective on him.
So, 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 so good. Carey, we took so much of your time. It is now your turn. Talk us through what you watched this week.
All right, no worries. I did watch the season one finale, or basically all of season one of Andor.
Mhm.
Fantastic finale. It sort of feels like it has a whole lot to do or a whole lot in common with The Last Jedi in terms of the
Yeah.
thought that anyone can be a hero, right? Basically before the Rise of Skywalker said, no, that can't be the case. But what I really liked about Andor is even the folks who are quote unquote heroes have to do some pretty terrible and heinous things, because when you're fighting a galactic evil, you have to do terrible things, and they take a toll, and you have to pay a price. And you really get to see that for the people in this show so much. And so that's what's really great about Andor. It's not like, hey, fly by, we come in, we blow up a Death Star and go on our merry way. You see and feel the impact of what this tyranny does to people on an everyday basis. And you, when they rise up and fight that evil, you're like, you want to do it with them, and that's incredibly powerful. So that was a pretty good finale, and it also was sort of the catalyst that sends our title character sort of on his journey. So that was sort of a really cool way to wrap up the first season. Um, I also watched, in fact, when we leave here, I'll be catching the most recent episode of Stargirl. But I'll tell you, man, this season has been kind of messy.
Yeah.
They've sort of banked this season on being quote unquote a murder mystery, and then I watch shows like, even watching Wednesday, and you see how they navigate a murder mystery and how well it's done. It I just hate to say it, it just puts a mirror up to Stargirl, and it shows how they fail. And I'm not saying that it's a failed season. I just think they failed at executing what they were trying to do. There have been
Mm-hmm.
some good story points, some bad ones, like Sylvester Pemberton is sort of like a manic depressive former superhero. That's just sort of a strange take to have. I've always thought that Starman was supposed to be like the equivalent of like Captain America,
Mm-hmm.
and this star, and I don't know if he is or is not, but that's just always what I've thought. The Starman that we've gotten in this series and in this show leaves a lot to be desired. It makes you wonder, how was he ever a hero?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's like, well, maybe he kind of wasn't. But I I am interested in seeing how they wrap all this up, considering that they brought back one of my favorite characters from the first season to sort of end this series. I'm excited to see where that goes. Um, and
The
beyond those,
the guy is the fave that they brought back, the guy that I keep saying has chemistry with her mom.
yes, yes,
Yes.
yeah.
Her
So
mom
yeah.
and villains, mad chemistry constantly.
Well, I mean, and so yeah, I mean that's it. It's funny because yeah, you're exactly right. More than what she has with her husband and
Yes.
daughter, but that's another story. Um, and finally, I did watch both Enola Holmes movies. Um, I do like, personally, I do like the second one more than I like the first one.
It's
They were
so
both
good.
I thought they were both good, but I prefer the second one. I like some of the things that they did. I remember the conversation that you guys had about it before I watched it, and so I was not, to be honest, I was not familiar with sort of the I don't want to say
Mhm.
unionization, but
Yeah.
essentially the walkout that sort of capped the movie. But what I liked about that was, if not knowing that, or whether you did or not, watching the movie, you sort of like went into it, and that once I started seeing how the story was unfolding, I was like, okay, wow. So Tewksbury gets to come in, and I don't want to say saves the day, but he was the platform that could have offered them an opportunity to expose and
Mhm.
make changes for what was going on. But what I really loved was the fact that that wasn't the case. Not that he wasn't like a person who could help, but they were able to do it themselves. They had the power. And
Mhm.
so, and I appreciate the fact that, if going forward, if that's what her detective agency is going to be about, I really think that's like sort of a cool thing to explore, particularly when you balance that with Sherlock, and sort of obviously the thoughts of that time period, right? So I think that's sort of a good way for her to sort of stick out and sort of chart her own path. And I'm assuming, hoping, fingers crossed, I guess we're going to get a third movie. I hope so.
I think we are.
So yeah, so I'm excited to see where that story goes. And speaking of Tewksbury, one of the things that I liked about him was that he seems to be a good person
Mhm.
doing good things, not because he was trying to impress Enola, but because he's a good person and she can see that and she can gravitate toward that. And so that's what I really liked about those two being paired together. Um,
Mhm.
I also liked the sort of twist, I guess, with Moriarty.
Yeah.
Um, I will tell you this though. I thought it was, I don't want to say strange, but like at the end when quote unquote Sherlock gets them all in the room, I'm like, if she just is quiet and doesn't say a damn thing, or do they really, are they able to like, arrest her and bring her in? Because basically she gave up all the goods. If she didn't say anything, I'm thinking, wouldn't she just be able to walk away from this? Um, so obviously we understand that she escapes, but I like the twist, and I don't want to say it was unexpected, but for me it was unexpected. So I really dig it. And you get to sort of see that the pieces in Sherlock's story are coming into focus at the same time that Anola's purpose and her vision and what she wants to do comes in focus at the same time. So I really like that. And what makes the second one much better than the first one is there's no freaking Mike Roth, man. That dude's terrible.
Yes. I think one of the things
Hmm.
that I liked about Moriarty that you're pointing out is that the Moriarty in the source material often does things that allows him, and in this incarnation her, to be caught, but it's very clear that if that they are that this entity is smart enough to not be caught. This incarnation of Moriarty could have not been caught if she had really, but there's a level of rightness or righteousness or justification to what she's done that in the context of this story, when she's explaining what she's done, why she's done, and why it's not that bad, we believe her. I believe, well, I love villainous women anyway, so she could be bad. I'm still going to like her. But we believe her because there is this level of like rightness to her that we're having to grapple with in the second movie of, you know, some of these workers who are painted out to be bad were good, and doing bad things like walking out on your job or going against your boss are actually good here because it's for the greater good, and we need to unionize, and we need to refuse authoritarian rule, and we need to refuse bad conditions. All of this, we're having to kind of grapple with this from the lens of Enola, who's like a teen girl who's having to figure out kind of her version of wrong and right. And I liked it, but
Well, and to kind of add to the point of like she kind of outed herself in kind of like finalized the discovery it was her. There is a bit of the Batman Joker vibes
yeah.
between her and Shakespeare of part of the allure of the crime that she's doing. Hers is very systematic, and hers is not all because she needs to commit crime. Hers is also part of it because she just wants to.
Right.
And the joy that she extrapolates from that also comes from she sees Sherlock is kind of like the biggest net for her to avoid. That he is the most likely to ever catch her, and she enjoys teasing him. She enjoys taunting him, and even though now he has a face to the name of Moriarty, she is still getting to taunt him and elude him and make his life miserable. And she takes joy from that kind of game of trickery. And I think we're going to see that because obviously she will escape. I mean, come on.
Right.
And as that dynamic continues to play out, that's going to be the more core aspect of it. Of he knows she's messing with, and she enjoys doing it, but because he has this kind of moral code of I can't just let her go. I can't not chase after her. She's doing these things. He's going to chase anyway, and that's going to be an interesting dynamic that they'll get to explore on the side if they get to do a movie 3.
They'd make a really good toxic relationship. And with
You know
that,
what?
sorry, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. No, this doesn't mean anything, but like the very last scene when they're like walking out, it's like if this was a comedy, right? I'm having like Family Guy flashbacks, right? So they walk out of the factory and they around the corner, And then I was just waiting to see like them to come back 30 seconds later, and they get to the end of the street, and everyone's looking at themselves like, "So what are we gonna do now?" It would have just been funny. It would have been sort of like a tag of hilarity. But no, I really like it. I'm glad you guys talked me into watching it. So that's cool.
I'm glad you liked it too. I'm very excited for hopefully a third movie to come out at some point. In true Sherlock fashion, I'm sure it will be years between installments, as is always the case, but it is what it is. Well, our next little chat will be on the 14th of December, 2 weeks from now. We'll be talking White Lotus finale, Mysterious Benedict Society finale. There's actually quite a few finales that will occur for some of these shows between now and then, and that will wrap us up before the Christmas holidays. I'm very excited. I actually have not finished The Crown yet, so I will also be chatting about The Crown finale. I already have opinions, but let's wait until I have informed ones. And I'm looking forward to talking to you guys then.
Dig it.
Bye.
Bye.